Welcome you all to our Wilderness Discoveries program that has been running from the last week. And a very good evening to every one of you who's joining. And I hope this is going to be a very exciting event. So first of all, I just want to let you know that we are recording this event live. So if you have any concerns, please switch off your cameras. And the other thing that I actually want to mention is that if you have missed our first session, the Urban Wildlife Discoveries, Urban Wildlife Stories rather, the part 1, don't worry, we have it recorded and we have the recording. So we will send you the link for that as well as an email so you can watch it. And for those who have actually joined us for the last program, I hope you all made the bird feeder like Ms. Anjallee asked, and I hope that I have seen few pictures and videos of the bird feeders that you guys have made. You have sent it to us, so we are very excited to see. Please keep on sending them, and there's an exciting gift waiting for you for the winner actually. So without taking much time, I would like to hand over to our Ms. Anjallee, who has been very generous to help us with all these events, rather with a very busy schedule of conserving nature. So Ms. Anjallee, it's over to you. Hello.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I'm really excited to do my second presentation with you kids today. Just sharing my screen now. Okay. So the
Perfect.
last
now we can
time,
yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start now. So last time I talked a little bit more about the urban fishing cat and what is urban wildlife? So urban wildlife is wildlife that has adapted their lifestyle to living in the concrete jungles of cities like Colombo and also in suburban neighborhoods like the outskirts of Colombo. And you might be familiar with typical wildlife like rats, pigeons, and even crows. But you might not realize that a fishing cat like this, or a porcupine, or even a Eurasian otter may be lurking nearby. And oftentimes, many of these wild neighbors, they go unseen, and they often prefer it that way. So Colombo is built on a wetland ecosystem, and all these wildlife live here. So why are these wetlands so important? So before I touch on that, let me explain to you what an ecosystem is. So imagine an ecosystem as a neighborhood that an animal lives in, alongside other animals, trees, and all the non-living things like the rocks around it and the water. And a habitat, like I explained last time, is the house that an animal lives in the neighborhood, a place where it has everything it needs, its food and shelter and other resources. So Colombo's wetlands are an important ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem provides many services to the city and to us. For example, by reducing flooding, cooling the city, it reduces pests like mosquitoes, and it also removes pollutants from the air. Like I said, it's so important for urban biodiversity, especially for vulnerable animals like the fishing cat, which we learned about. Now, there are over 250 plants and animal species that have been recorded in Colombo's wetlands, and 250 plants and 280 animal species. And these include freshwater fish, reptiles, amphibians, butterflies, dragonflies, and even small mammals. And these wetlands are also important breeding habitats, and they provide foraging and roosting cover, especially for native and migratory bird species. Before I explain what migrant and native or resident birds are, so a resident bird will remain in Sri Lanka throughout the year, but a migrant bird, they actually travel long distances from other countries, and it's winter in those countries at the time they choose to travel. So they come to Sri Lanka and they wait out the winter on our warm island here. And this happens from October to March. And it's a really good time for you to go into a wetland park or even in your home garden and observe these birds. So in 2018, Colombo was declared the first capital to be accredited as an international wetland city by Ramsar. Now you must be wondering what Ramsar is or what the Ramsar Convention is. So it is actually an international treaty to protect wetlands. It's meant to stop the loss of wetland areas now and in the future, and it recognizes that wetlands are an important ecosystem. And it's also named after the town of Ramsar in Iran. So if anybody asks you what that is, now you know. So let's take a look at some of the animals you might find in your garden and also in the rest of Colombo. And we'll start with birds. Now, woodpeckers. This is a common one that you might have seen in your garden. The one on the left, it's called the red-backed flameback woodpecker. And this bird is endemic to Sri Lanka. But I'll explain what that is in a little while. So woodpeckers will peck away at the bark of a tree. And they do this for two reasons. One could be because there are insects or grubs hiding inside that tree or the hollow of the tree, and they'll peck away at it to get to these insects, which they feed on. And the second reason is they'll peck away to make a hollow, which they'll turn into their nest, where they lay their eggs and have chicks. And yes, so that's the woodpecker. And to the right of the woodpecker is a brown-headed barbet. Now, I love barbets. Barbets actually occupy the abandoned hollows that woodpeckers have made. So they reuse that hole. So they don't make new holes themselves, but just use an abandoned hole. And if you look closely at the picture of the barbet, you can see these little hairs just around the beak. Now those hairs, they can actually detect vibrations in the air that insects make. And that allows them to pinpoint the location of the insect so they can go and catch them and feed on them. So that's barbets for you. And then to the right of the barbet is a purple sunbird, very pretty small birds. They have those curved beaks, and it's a special adaptation that they have to feed on nectar. So they'll insert their beak into a flower and then feed on this nectar. And they're a bit like hummingbirds. And then to the bottom left, you have the Asian quail. You might know it as the koha. And to the right of that is the yellow-billed warblers, which are really chatty and very social birds. So you might find them in small groups, hopping along the ground, feeding on insects and grubs. And yeah, I love warblers. And then there's the red-vented bulbuls with their bright yellow bottoms, as you can see. And also they have this little interesting hairdo like a mohawk. They raise that up sometimes, and they could use that for communication. We're not entirely sure. And then beautiful kingfishers. So one common one that you might have seen in your garden is the white-breasted kingfisher. It's usually found near water bodies, and they wait patiently to dive in and catch fish and frogs that may come near the surface. But they also feed on small reptiles and insects too. So these kingfishers, they live in burrows on the edges of streams, rivers, and ponds. So if you see a little hole on the side of a pond or the bank of a river, it's probably a hole that was made by a kingfisher. Now, a very common beta that even I see near my home, because I live next to a good water source, is a little egret. Now, these egrets, they have bright yellow feet, and it's very easy to use that feature to distinguish them from other egrets that look similar, like the intermediate egret or the cattle egret, and they have black feet. So now you can identify a little egret. Another common waders is a purple swarm hen. They are pretty purple and can be found walking over lily pads and even water hyacinth leaves as they search for something to eat like insects or fish in the water below. And this mother swarm hen is feeding her chick something in the picture. And we have birds of prey too, like this small shikra, very common in urban areas, and also this brilliant looking Brahmini kite. They soar high up in the air and they spend time close to water bodies where they swoop down to catch fish and other animals. So now we'll take a look at some mammals. So common mammals like the Indian brown mongoose or the Asian palm civet to the right. Do you remember I spoke about the Asian palm civet being very similar to a fishing cat? Because they have the same stripes and patterns, but very similar anyway. And a lot of people mistake the civets for fishing cats. So they spend time in your garden and also your rooftop, where they run around making a racket as they chase each other and rats, and they actually feed on the rats. And speaking of rats, we have big ones like the bandicoot rat, and another rodent like the porcupine that I showed you a picture of before. So they also visit your garden, but all these mammals I mentioned so far, they are nocturnal. So you are unlikely to see them in the daytime. So they are most active in the night. Although you can find evidence of the bandicoot rat if you look around your garden and see a huge hole in the ground, that leads to a tunnel system that the bandicoot rat actually uses to move around underground. And if you want to find evidence of porcupines, you might see quills of the porcupine, those big spines on their body. Those get released sometimes when they get scared or feel threatened, and you could find them lying around on the ground. And then there are smaller rodents too, like the Indian palm squirrel, calling out in the morning and evenings very loudly. They feed on nuts and seeds and fruits and also insects. And another favorite of mine are bats. In this picture, you can see an Indian flying fox bat hanging upside down. So these bats are frugivores, and that means that they eat fruits. So during the daytime, they roost or they spend the day in a tree hanging upside down. And then at night, they fly around. And we also have smaller species of bats that eat insects, the little echolocation, because they can't see very well. Next, let's take a look at some primates. So you are very likely to see two species of primates in Colombo, and both these species are endemic. And I did mention this word before, and I told you I'll explain what it means. So endemism is when a plant or animal lives only in a particular location, such as a specific island like Sri Lanka, or habitat type or other defined zone. And the western purple-faced langur on the right and the torque macaque on the left are both endemic. So you don't find them anywhere else in the world, only in Sri Lanka. So the western purple-faced langur is critically endangered, and that means that its population or its numbers are under threat. They are going down due to threats that they face, and therefore they need protection. So the western purple-faced langur is a herbivore. It feeds on fruits and a variety of leaves, and it has a specialized gut to digest these leaves. Therefore, they cannot eat anything else, especially not human food, which unfortunately some people do try to feed them. And the torque macaque is another endemic primate, like I said. However, unlike the purple-faced langur, it's an omnivore. So that means that it can feed on vegetation as well as meat. And this is why these torque macaques survive so well in urban areas like our city, because they feed on refuge or food left out by people. They can eat almost anything. But these foods are again not healthy to them. And it can also encourage bad behavior in these animals. But I'll touch on that a little bit more when I speak about the threats all urban wildlife faces. And of course, the fishing cat. We learned about this at length in the last presentation. They love water and they have unique adaptations that allow them to fish or catch their favorite prey, which are fish, in the water as well. And the fishing cats, they have an important ecosystem role to play. So fishing cats are what you call an apex predator. In the habitat they are living in here, there are no other top predators. So an apex predator is an animal that is at the very top of the food chain. This means that they will hunt other animals but are not hunted themselves. So in Colombo's wetlands, the fishing cat is number one. And because they are apex predators, they can help to keep rodent populations under control. So rats, they can sometimes be considered a pest, especially if their numbers increase too much. They may spread diseases, and even rodents like the porcupine could be considered an agricultural pest if their population is too high. So what does the fishing cat do? Along with other predatory mammals like the mongoose and civets, it would help to keep these rodent numbers down by hunting them and eating them. Reptiles, my all-time favorite. I am sure you kids have seen these little fellows running around your garden or hanging out on the branch of a small plant. It's called the Oriental garden lizard. And these lizards, their tails can be very long, stiff, and pointy. And just like other reptiles, they can shed their skins. And just like chameleons, these lizards can move each of their eyes in different directions. And another common name for them is the changeable lizard, because they can change their colors during the breeding season, which is why the one on the right has a bright red throat and also a nice colorful red back. And the left is the water monitor lizard, also known as a kabaragoya. They spend their time in the water. They do hunt sometimes, but they mostly scavenge. That means that they go around, and if they see the carcass of an animal, which is like the dead body of an animal, they'll feed on it. And by feeding on it, they are acting as an ecosystem cleanser. So they are cleansing the environment. They're cleaning it up for us. And then on the right, we have a land monitor lizard. Now, land monitors are slightly smaller than the water monitors. They also have a different color. As you can see, they're a more uniform gray color, while the water monitor has a lovely pattern, banding patterns and rings. So the land monitor spends its time on tree branches, on the ground, basking in the sun. They will actively hunt for their food. So they'll stick their tongues out and taste the air and locate their prey. In fact, a lot of lizards do this. And then they'd also dig in the earth with their claws to find little insects, frogs, and grubs that are hiding underneath. And land monitors also live in burrows in the ground and even in hollows in trees. So now let's take a look at one of my favorite snakes, which is the Oriental rat snake. So this is a non-venomous snake, and it may visit your garden, and don't worry, as long as it's left alone, it's completely harmless. They are an important part of the ecosystem too, as they help to maintain balance by keeping rodent populations, that is rats and other rodents like smaller rodents, under control. So just like they have a part to play. Every single animal. And now let's take a look at the Indian black turtle. Yes, we do have turtles in Colombo. So this is also called an Indian pond terrapin. It is a species of medium-sized freshwater turtle. They are also found in other parts of South Asia. They spend the day basking, and because they are omnivores, they'll feed on aquatic vegetation and also on fish and insects in their watery home. And finally, the last reptile I'll be talking about is the saltwater crocodile.
Excuse me.
Saltwater crocodile. Yes?
Why does the black turtle live in Sri Lanka, not India?
It does live in India. It lives in other parts of South Asia too. So you find them in India and you find them in Sri Lanka. But the really cool thing is, from this black turtle, there's one subspecies that lives in Sri Lanka that you only find in Sri Lanka and nowhere else. And that one is found in Colombo. So there are two subspecies of this Indian black turtle in Sri Lanka. And I have to explain what a subspecies is. So let's think, for example, about leopards. You get an African leopard and a Sri Lankan leopard, right? And they look slightly different. Their features are different, their heights are different, and genetically they're different. It's the same with the black turtle. So you find one subspecies of Indian black turtle in India and one that's unique to Sri Lanka alone, that is unlike any in the world. So you do find them elsewhere, but we have our own endemic species. So that's something you can tell people about. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes.
All righty. Let's talk about the saltwater crocodile then. So saltwater crocodiles are also found in India, in parts of South Asia, and also Northern Australia. And saltwater crocodiles can also live in freshwater. So you might find them near the ocean and in estuaries in Sri Lanka too, not just in Colombo. And this one over here is basking in the sun. And you know why crocodiles and other reptiles do that? It's because they are cold-blooded. So unlike us mammals, they can't regulate their own body temperature. They have to come out and spend a few hours in the sun, warm up, and then go back into the water and cool down again. So all reptiles need to do this. So I'll tell you some fun facts about the saltwater crocodile. They are the largest species of reptile in the world.
We have 66 teeth.
Yes, they do have 66 teeth. That's a lot of teeth. Now, butterflies and bees. I'm sure
Butterflies
there's
and bees.
Yes. So, you know
Butterflies and bees.
So do you know what attracts butterflies and bees to your garden? It's all the flowering plants. And I mentioned that Colombo has a great number of those as well. So they're extremely important to your garden. And two butterflies that you might see very often are the blue glassy tiger and the plain tiger. But there's plenty more. And you can identify them if you get a butterfly field guide. And we also have honeybees. Now, these butterflies and bees are important pollinators, and I'll explain what that is. So now pollination, it is the process that allows plants to reproduce. So most plants, they need bees, other insects, and sometimes even bats to pollinate from one plant to the next. So you can see the bee in the picture. It's on a flower and it has some yellow fuzz on its body, on its legs and its wings. So that is pollen, and it transports this pollen from one flower to another flower, sometimes very far away too, because these animals travel long distances, and that new flower will get pollinated and produce more seeds, and then new plants will grow. So that is why these insects and bats are so important to the ecosystem. So you can see all these animals in your home garden. If you go to the wetland parks like Deakin and Deakin, just take a walk around any densely vegetated open park, even Vihara Mahadevi Park, and you can see plenty of these animals. Just grab your binoculars if you have them, a notepad, observe and write down any behavior that you noticed and increase your knowledge on urban wildlife. So urban wildlife also faces a number of threats. One of these is habitat loss. When the home that these animals have known, like a small forest patch or even a large garden sometimes, can disappear to make room for development, like building new roads and buildings. And also pollution, there are wastewater, refuse and solid waste and plastic can make their way into these waterways. And that can contaminate the water and even the wetland ecosystem that these animals are living in. Another thing is road accidents. A lot of the time animals end up as roadkill when they try to cross a road, especially at night when they're active. So it's so important to drive slowly in the daytime and nighttime to protect these animals. Another problem is the spread of diseases. So lots of domestic animals like cats and dogs and even stray animals, they can carry diseases like rabies or feline parvovirus. And if they come into contact with a wild animal, they can transfer these. And also domestic and stray animals, they can even attack wildlife. That's why if you have pets, it's really important to keep them indoors as much as possible, and also to vaccinate your pets to keep them healthy and the wildlife too. And I also mentioned before that it's not very advisable to feed animals, especially not primates or any animal, because by feeding them, you're encouraging bad behavior. They'll become dependent on you. If you hand them a candy bar or a cracker, they'll keep wanting that because they like the taste. And if you don't give it to them one day, they're probably going to get frustrated and try to take things from humans by force. And then unfortunately, we might see them as a threat. And it's not even the animal's fault. So it's never a good idea to feed them anything, even food that you might think would be healthy for them. So don't feed wildlife, and that will eliminate, hopefully, that threat. And also some animals can feed on livestock that people keep at home, like poultry such as chickens. And if these chickens or poultry are not kept in cages to protect them, wild animals, of course, will naturally hunt them. And when they do that, humans would come into conflict with them as they get upset. So it's always better to keep these animals in an enclosed cage to keep them safe and keep us from getting frustrated at animals just being wild and doing their thing. So what can we do as individuals to help urban wildlife? We can start by reducing our impact. So you can reduce the amount of waste that you produce. You can have a compost bin in your garden. You can recycle things like plastics and even reuse items like that curd pot that I reused to make a bird water feeder. And of course, don't feed wildlife. It's really not necessary. And also vaccinate your pets, keep them indoors, and keep pet food and water bowls inside so it doesn't attract wild animals. And go on a city safari because that is always fun, and try to spot wildlife and learn more about them. And most importantly, make wildlife feel welcome to your garden by improving their habitat. You can grow native plants and also wildflowers, and you can avoid using synthetic fertilizers. There's plenty of natural good things out there that you can look up even online. And you can also provide water for animals too. Water is safe to give as long as you keep changing the water so it doesn't get contaminated, and also so that mosquitoes don't breed. So now let's talk about how the Urban Fishing Cat Conservation Project is working to protect fishing cats and in turn protect urban wildlife. So the goal of the organization is to study the guardians of Colombo, who are the fishing cats and the only urban fishing cat population in the world. So by using the fishing cat as a flagship species, you can protect its wetland home and other wildlife that share its space. So what is a flagship species? Now, when you look at this fishing cat, the first thing that you think is that it's really cute. It's so unique. It has great adaptations. It loves water. It can fish like an expert in that water, and not many cats can do that. They are also a nationally endangered and globally vulnerable animal. So that means that its population or numbers are decreasing or going down, and they need help. They need our help to protect them. So they can be used as a symbol to protect wetlands by studying them and raising awareness. And so the Urban Fishing Cat Conservation Project does that by carrying out research, by setting up camera traps. So these camera traps take pictures of wildlife And it can help them to understand how fishing cats are interacting with other wildlife in the parks, and can also help the team understand how many fishing cats there might be in Colombo's wetlands too. Another thing they would do is study fishing cats' scat or poop and figure out what the cats have been eating. And the third thing that they do is they put GPS collars around the cats' necks so they can study their movements. So let's say a fishing cat is using a road very frequently, and the GPS data will tell us exactly where these locations are. And in the future, maybe we could set up road signs so that people would know that fishing cats use this road to cross, and they would be more careful and drive slowly, and that would reduce the number of road accidents and also protect other animals that use that road too. So another thing that the team does is to by helping in the removal of invasive species of plants. Now you can see that these plants, the water hyacinths, that's what they are called, with the purple flower. So they cover the surface of the water completely and they block waterways. And this makes it hard for the fish and other animals in the water and any animal that depends on this water and the fish and other creatures in it. So they have to be removed to keep the environment clean and keep the ecosystem healthy. So these invasive plants, they were not here from the start. Somebody introduced them either from another country or another place on the island. So they are not native. They don't belong here. And if possible, they have to be removed or their numbers controlled. And finally, spreading awareness through workshops and educational programs to encourage and inspire people, especially young children like yourself, so that you can pass this knowledge on and also work towards appreciating and conserving the wetlands of Colombo. So I hope that you learned something new today and that you've learned to appreciate urban wildlife and the fishing cats of Colombo more. So thank you very much for listening. If you would like to learn more information on what the organizations do, please check out the websites, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and even drop us a message if you would like to know more about the awareness work that we do. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Anjallee. That was really interesting.
Welcome.
And I think everybody must have learned at least one new thing from the presentation. And before we move into the question round, I just want to mention that this program is the Wilderness Discoveries. This is a continuous series of programs that we are hoping to do with Eco-Team Sri Lanka, one of the pioneering ecotourism companies in the country. And at the end of this series, there's something really exciting that is going to happen. So please join us with all our programs. So in the end, you will know what it is. And trust me, it's going to be really interesting and it's going to be a really good experience for everyone of you. So Anjallee, we do have some questions. So I'll start one by one. So maybe you can actually start. Yeah. Okay. This is from London, actually. It's asking, are monkeys dangerous? My father asked me not to look at them in the eye.
Okay.
What do you think?
So, remember I told you how feeding animals can encourage bad behavior in them? If monkeys were not fed, they probably wouldn't be as aggressive. Generally, they like to be left alone. They like to do their own thing. So normally, no, but don't approach them. And if there are monkeys in your area, don't feed them. Then they're not going to be dangerous. Because if you do and you deny them a treat, that might be a problem. So that's what I can say about monkeys. Generally, macaques are a little bit more aggressive. They are more intelligent. They do like to grab your things. but the langurs are more gentle. However, for both species, respect their wildness and they will respect you back in return.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a question from Dionan.
Sorry?
There's a question there from Dionan Muller.
Okay.
Go ahead, but
It's not really a question, it's really what happened to my balcony. So a monkey came on my balcony. When I came to see it, it jumped all the way to the roof.
It did. Yeah, they can jump really high. I really
yes.
love that. Like superheroes.
That's really nice. Okay, there's another question actually, and that this is again from London. During the COVID lockdown, we saw more urban animals in London. Do you think that they will go back into hiding post-lockdown?
It depends on the animal. So I can use an example in Sri Lanka. So we saw a lot of peacocks after the lockdown.
Oh, yeah.
And the peacocks came around and they stayed. Because even at my home still, the peacocks haven't left. But there are some animals that do like to stay hidden. So because during the lockdown, things were quiet, they felt more comfortable being out in the open. But since people are active now again, they may go back into hiding. But if there are some animals that don't mind people being around, like let's say peacocks, langurs, some birds, they may stick around. So it really depends on the animals.
And in my experience, what happened to me was that, yes, the peacocks, leaf monkeys, and a set of cheetah deer as well that actually escaped from one of the army camps, now running around our neighborhood. I'm very close to Colombo.
No.
Yeah, it's like going on a safari in the morning.
Oh.
So it's very interesting. So, and
That's
actually,
perfect.
there's another one.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's one more question. Actually, I think I should be able to answer that. This is about, we are visiting in December 22 to Colombo. I think are there any tours to see Colombo wild animals? And I can answer that question. Actually, there is. So for the person who's actually visiting Colombo in April, I'll read out my email address. If you could write to me fdo3@ecoteam.lk, I can actually find you a good tour to go around Colombo and see all these animals. Maybe we'll try and meet Miss Anjallee as well, if she's around.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to.
Yeah, then we can actually do that. So that is actually the questions that we have from the audience. And if there's anyone else who would like to ask anything from Miss Anjallee?
I think Ishara is asking a question. Go ahead, Ishara. Take yourself off mute and ask the question.
Are you going to put the email for the chat? The email.
Nale, I didn't actually get you.
Means like you told the letters. Tell some letters. Are you going to put that thing for the chat? Like
my email address, is it?
yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll send it to you.
Ishara, we have your email address, so Mikara will email you.
Okay. So is there anyone that wants to ask anything about wildlife, not only about urban wildlife, but anything, if you have anything that you have seen? No? Great. So I'll take this opportunity to remind you about the next session that we are going to do. It'll be on the next Sunday at the same time. It'll be about the Ilisu pangolins, about the Indian pangolin. I'm sure some of you may have not even heard about the pangolin. Most people do, but then again, it's a very interesting animal, the most trafficked animal in the world, in the brink of extinction, and there are so many people, good people in the country doing so much to conserve them. So do join us for the next series of the next discussion on next Sunday, and for the coming discussion after that as well. And please send us, and this recording will be available for you guys, because we are recording this for you. If somebody has missed, so you can actually have a look at it as well, and the previous one. So if there's nothing else, we can actually conclude the event for today.
Excuse me?
Yeah, darling. Yeah, go ahead.
For the next program, can I show some videos of my animals and my elephant?
Of course, definitely. We would love to see it. Just send it. I will email you, so you can actually give me some time so I can incorporate it to the program. Yeah, I'll send you an email.
Okay, sir. Thanks.
Great. So,
and just to remind you, if you have any ideas or questions of what you would like to see for the next events in the future, or if you would like, somebody who could also speak, please email us. We will email all of you as a follow-up. Ingara will email all of you as a follow-up. Please reach out to us if you have any ideas on how we can improve and what we can do differently.
Yes, definitely we can do that. So then if there's nothing else, I would like to conclude the event for today. Thank you so much, Anjallee, Prabhakaran, for taking time to join us and share your knowledge. It's been really nice. And thank you all of you for actually participating. And we hope to see you next week as well. And keep on saving the animals.